In the waters of Tallinn Bay, 6 miles northwest of the Estonian capital city, US Marine Corps First Lieutenant Louis Roscoe looked out into the blackness, his night vision catching sight of a fellow landing craft of the 26th Marine Expeditionary Unit as it made its way for the shoreline, while helicopters and fast-moving aircraft flashed by overhead. Like the other 1,200 Marines in the battalion landing team, Louis's thoughts were focused on the tasks ahead. His emotions a jumbled soup of excitement, calm and trepidation. Though the landing in Estonia was not to be a Normandy-like storming of a contested beach, as Russian ground forces were still more than 40 miles east of Tallinn, the landing site was still well within the range of deadly Russian air and missile strikes, be they conventional, chemical, or in the nightmare scenario, nuclear. Before boarding his landing craft, Louis wrote in his journal, "Overall, our confidence is high, but so is the pucker factor. This would be the first time in generations that the US Marine Corps would face a modern peer state in a real-world battleground." For Louis, all of it felt surreal, like being a participant in someone else's movie. Suddenly, a tremendous explosion turned the surrounding sea to daylight as the Constellation-class frigate, the USS Chesapeake, erupted into a massive ball of flame. Though the bay had been swept for mines, it proved difficult, if not impossible, to hunt down and destroy the Russians' unmanned underwater kamikaze drones that lay silent, dormant and often hidden in the clutter of old wrecks. One of those autonomous drones had activated and found the Chesapeake. From 3 miles away, Louis could see men leaping into the water, some in flames, as helicopters raced to rescue survivors from the doomed ship. Louis and his men watched it all in silence, their first experience with the deadly consequences of war. Sadly, it would not be their last, and D-Day had only just begun. Operation Citadel began with the simultaneous insertion of the US 173rd Airborne Brigade into Latvia and the US Marines' 26th Marine Expeditionary Unit into Estonia. The objectives were to secure the capital cities of Tallinn and Riga, slow and delay the Russians' advance from the east, and provide the critical time needed for NATO to gather forces for a powerful future counterattack from Poland. But first, the 26th and the 173rd needed to get boots safely on the ground. Doing so in the modern age of warfare, where intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance were ubiquitous and in real time, where once an enemy unit was seen it could be killed within moments, meant that the mission of becoming unseen was paramount. Racing over the Baltic Sea, Pilot Lieutenant Commander Joe Kunzler, along with Electronic Warfare Officer Lieutenant Preet Sangha, led the way in a flight of EA-18G Growlers, their electronic systems designed to jam, deafen and blind Russia's local radar, sensor and communications networks. It was the Growlers that would kick off Operation Citadel, firing their loadout of high-speed anti-radiation missiles at Russian radar sites. Meanwhile, scores of NATO and Russian fighter aircraft were tangling for supremacy of the skies over the eastern Baltics. A retired college professor in the Estonian town of Kallaste recounted what he saw. It was like a man-made thunderstorm, he said. The sonic booms, the missiles streaking across the sky, the flaming wreckage raining down. I watched it all in terrible awe. The next morning, he discovered a single boot in his yard, still holding the foot of a lost pilot. Despite painful losses suffered on both sides, air superiority, if but briefly, tipped to NATO's favor. It bought enough time to bring in the ground troops. Crossing over the Baltic Sea south of Stockholm, Sweden, an aerial convoy of heavy lift aircraft carried the 173rd Airborne Brigade into Latvia. By dawn, more than 3,000 paratroopers were on the ground and dispersed between the Riga International Airport, the Spilve airfield, and the former ex-Soviet Rumbula airbase, the last of which requiring bulldozers to clear debris off the dormant runway that was most recently used for drag racing. To the southeast, 3 companies from the 173rd parachuted in near the city of Koknese to bolster NATO and Latvian ground forces in their tactical withdrawal from the city of Jēkabpils. The airborne assault proved a success, with key defensive positions established by mid-afternoon in and around Riga at the cost of 6 American dead, 5 from a single Russian rocket attack, and 1 shot by a local farmer who mistook the American for Russian. Further north, as Marines made their way to shore in Tallinn Bay, the need to be unseen by the enemy was at its zenith, where a single missile attack on the landing ships or the landing zone itself could end the operation in disaster. Combined with NATO's localized electronic warfare efforts, the US also implemented a brief but powerful cyber attack on satellite, communications, tactical ballistic, and air defense systems inside Russia's western military district. Yet unproven in war, the attack, along with decoy air and sea drones operating north of Tallinn, provided enough deception to divert incoming Russian missiles, those that were not shot down, to explode harmlessly into the sea, into expendable drones, or into targets that had been evacuated long before. It would be hours later when Russia learned that despite electronic intelligence pointing to a US Marine landing in the port of Tallinn, the true landing site was Struumi Beach, some 3 miles west of the city. Though local social media posts showed footage of the landing, it was initially dismissed by Russian intelligence, believing it disinformation. As men and equipment rapidly offloaded at Struumi Beach, US Marines suffered their worst losses of the day 25 miles west, near the Paldiski ferry terminal, when a pair of fully loaded V-22 Ospreys were shot down by enemy shoulder-fired missiles during an aerial assault of the terminal. "Seeing them both auger in," said another pilot, "you hope to God, but you know there's no way they're walking away from that." Despite the losses, and after heavy fighting, the ferry terminal was later secured, allowing follow-on forces to move in for the forthcoming mission to isolate and destroy the Russian forces operating out of the seized Air Force base southwest of Tallinn. As evening set in, the cost of the first day of Operation Citadel could be tallied, with NATO forces suffering 148 casualties and 38 civilians killed. Russian media reported a mere 75 casualties, a total widely disputed even by military bloggers inside Russia. While the fires in the port still burned and missile alerts continued to blare, Lieutenant Louis Roscoe looked out over the city of Tallinn and considered himself lucky. He'd survived D-Day. He had no illusions of what was next. He wrote prophetically in his journal, "The worst is yet to come." In the next episode, Operation Citadel and the battles for Tallinn and Riga continue. If you enjoy this series and would like to support it, please send me a YouTube thanks or go to my Flat Circle History Patreon site, where you'll get behind-the-scenes access, member-only content, and more. Plus, it will help out John, the guy who makes all these episodes possible. Finally, a quick shout-out to Jim Dietz and the Dietz Foundation, publishers of the groundbreaking war game, Littoral Commander. Jim was a big help for Episode 8 in giving me insight into the complexities and dangers of modern-day amphibious operations. A big thank you to Jim, and I highly encourage you to check out his foundation's website. And as always, please like, subscribe and share this video. And thanks for watching.